Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman, and today we're going to discuss the politics of shipping trivial changes. This comes out of our philosophy of, continuous iteration or thesis shipping, where you're going to make lots and lots of little changes over time to completely replace something.
hmm
And one pushback I've gotten about this is, hey, I made this change and it didn't do anything, or it did like nothing. And people are like, well, that was all your change? And you get pushback because it's not something that's you can't do it like at the end of a sprint. You can't do a demo. It's like, well, what'd you
Mm.
do to this demo with this sprint? Well, I ran the linter on all these classes so that they are all up to our current coding standards, and then I went through and I fixed all the warnings and log errors that I found, and then I did some cleanup on variable types and variable names so that it was understandable. You could have 4 or 5 MRs
hmm
in a sprint, and they're a pure refactor, and the net effect of them is nothing.
Yeah. Well,
Which,
something.
well, it's something.
Yeah.
The net effect on the system is nothing, right? From the customer perspective, the net effect is nothing.
Right. Yeah.
But you, the developer, understand that, hey, I just basically cleaned off my table. Now, when I come to
Yeah.
actually make a real change to this thing, it's me, like I can go right at it. It's going to really cut my time and be able to move with much more confidence.
hmm
But it feels weird if you push a change and it's a pure refactor and it does nothing. And I've gotten pushback from managers, I've gotten pushback from project people where, like, why did you, like, you did all these changes, but they didn't do anything. It's like, well, yes,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Um, Kent Beck's recent book on this, Tidy First,
I have to read
published
that.
very recently, kind of talks about this. He calls them the tidyings. Um, he uses the word a lot in the book. You get tongue twisted saying it so much, but it's
The
essentially that
tidings.
you're going through and you're doing things that's not changing behavior of the code. You're doing just those nice things like leaving some comments, making clarifying variable names, um, things that just make it easier and clean your plate, like you were saying. Just make it easier for the next time you're ready to approach it. Way easier for either you or the next person. And those are valuable because over time they definitely add up. But
Mm-hmm.
I could see trying to pitch that to somebody maybe not tech oriented or somebody looking from the perspective of like how is the customer happy about this, um, and I can see that being a hard sell at the moment, but then maybe the next time you actually uh, add some new functionality that was made faster to deliver because of the previous tidying, you can include that as like, oh, that was part of my part one of the other one was just like getting this ready, and that's why I was able to deliver this feature in 2 days instead of 4 days because I actually spent some time documenting this section or whatnot.
Right. It also makes your pull request MRs much smaller
hmm
if you can separate all the cleanup work or the refactoring work from the actual changing work. It'll make your MR smaller, which will make them easier to review and approve. It will also reduce the chances that you're going to introduce bugs.
Yeah,
Because it's like, oh, well, nothing should change. So if anything looks like it's going to change, that's wrong.
yeah. So, what are some ways that you think we could sell this to people? Like you said, like I don't think I've actually had the same pushback maybe as you on delivering these small little changes because I think it's clear to the developers and the people that I'm pitching to are I think very tech oriented and they understand that this is like a step towards better delivery in the future. So for your case, how do you think you could better make the argument that this is valuable?
The way you make the better argument is you explain that it's pieces of a whole.
hmm
You know, one thing that I've become very convinced of is that everyone is taking giant steps and steps that are way too large. People talk about, oh, this is going to be phase one, and then we're going to worry about
Yeah.
phase two. It's like, no, 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 no. There's forget phases. It's like this is step one, and
hmm
then we're going to do step two, and it's going to be a step,
Yeah.
and it's go, it's a very small thing. Or the other one I like is turning the crank using a ratchet metaphor, where every time you turn the crank and the little, that goes up one notch, a tooth on a gear, every time you click in a tooth of a gear, it's pretty trivial,
Yeah.
but it's clicked in and it goes forward.
Yeah.
I think another thing that is helpful is, and it's helpful on both sides, being able to explain the small change in the context of the whole. It helps ground you as a developer in what you're doing. Like there are times where I've gone off tidying and, sometimes you get lost in the weeds. You're like, well, should I just keep going because I'm having a blast or this
Yeah.
is
Yeah. I'll do that.
fun? I'm like, well, I'm past the point where I'm reasonably working, cleaning up the space that I'm going to be working on next.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I shouldn't, because this isn't going to help the larger context, or I don't think it will. And so being able to being able to explain your work inside of a larger context, it's not, oh, I'm going to refactor our endpoints to be more restful. It's, hey, our endpoint, talk about it in terms of the goal. Our endpoints are not restful. I'm going to be working to refactor them. First, I need to clean up what's already here so that I can start moving ahead.
Right.
And so
You could probably. Oh, go ahead. Continue.
Go for it.
I was going to say you could probably also make the argument, and this might sell better too, of de-risking, or using the term like less risk, and saying, the area that we're working in now. Do you remember John's giant PR, the phase 1, phase
lines.
2,
Yeah.
2,000 lines? Remember how that flopped and we had to revert because of some of these issues? Well, I'm basically making it to where we have less to review next cycle, such that we miss less in these very giant reviews, and the customer is not impacted. Selling it like that might be a bit better too.
Right. Trivial changes are also not risky changes.
Yeah.
They're a good thing. It's a good thing if your change is trivial, if you can show that it's moving forward.
The easier it is for a PR to be reviewed, in general, the less someone's going to accidentally miss something in the review of the PR. If it's 2,000 lines, somebody at some point is going to get a little tired or skip something, or they'll get acclimated to what they're reading and get numb to what they're looking at. But if you'll notice this actually. This happens to me a lot. On huge PRs, there's always LGTM, thumbs up.
Yeah.
But on 3 lines, there's like 50 comments, right? If someone's like super critical of a few lines going in, it's this kind of endurance thing, right? So, and if you're glossing over 2,000 lines, you're going to introduce risk. Whereas if you have small little things like this and people are leaving comments and feedback going, you're going to catch stuff. So I bet you could make that argument too.
Right. One place where I've encountered the pushback is from product people, where I'm saying, hey, I've pushed out all of these changes into production, but they're not all strung together yet, so it doesn't really do anything. Like it's not dark because the pieces are there and you can use them. There's just no reason to use them.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of baking in. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, where database schemas are often this way, where you'll make a schema change. You'll add new if you're going to add a new column, which is a non-breaking, a nullable column. You add the column in one change. Let that bake for a week, and then you change the software to use this new column.
Right.
Because you've so decoupled them, each of them is a trivial change, or a more trivial change in the case of DB schema. But it becomes much easier and less risky than, hey, we're going to update the software and we're going to change the schema. And so if there's an issue with the schema, we can't release the software.
Right.
And that, it compounds the risk and ups the pressure.
Totally. Cool. And also, I guess separately from that one too, like imagine you are working in a monolith where you have like a front end piece talking to the back end piece, talking to the new column you're going to add, trying to deliver it all in one PR. essentially, versus breaking them into pieces. Like, oh, we're prepping the database such that we can prep the back end, such that we can, you know, let the front end team, handle that separately. And like, so you end up breaking them apart into different deliverables. In general, smaller iterative deliverables are just going to be faster and less risky than trying to do big feature pushes.
Right. The bigger your steps, the less trivial your changes, the more risky it is.
Mm-hmm.
One last point that I would like to make: there's a storytelling aspect to all of this, which I think most developers are somewhat not numb, blind to. Where if you could tell a story of we're making this change, and it it there's a journey, and you want to talk about the journey of the transformation, and it doesn't need to be a long journey, but the more steps in the journey, the easier it is to understand the transformation.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a better way to explain it.
And most people can understand stories more than they can understand, feature lists or giant blocks of code. And so don't talk about, oh, we've added all these things.
Mm-hmm.
To go way back to Apple and Steve Jobs, you don't talk about the tech specs of an iPod. You say it's a jukebox in your pocket.
Yeah.
You don't pitch it that way. All right.
Cool.
I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.